Ready.
All right, David Bowie discography, take one.
Hello to the internet. I am here today to talk about my David Bowie discography, which is laid out before me. He's my favorite artist, so let's just get right into it. The first thing I have is his David Bowie 1966. These are his singles on the Pi label. He actually did a couple singles before this that are collected. I've been trying to track down that CD. It has this and some other songs that he recorded on other labels. They've compiled it. I haven't found it or paid the money to buy it yet. But this is some of his earliest stuff on the Pi label. Nothing that anyone would recognize that's not a huge David Bowie fan. Next up is his first release, self-titled, David Bowie on the Duram label. If you know David Bowie, this is, again, not anything you would really recognize as David Bowie, although there's some really good stuff on here. In the Heat of the Morning, London by Tata, Let Me Sleep Beside You, all really good songs. Probably the most well-known song on here is on disc 2, which is additional songs, and that is The Laughing Gnome, which is this single right here. B-side is The Gospel According to Tony Day. This was released. It's a kind of like a parody song. Not that great, but in the 70s, when he got big, this actually made it to number 8 on the charts. Just because that's how much of a star he was, that some single from like 5 years previous would chart at number 8. Kind of crazy. The next thing, when he finally really gets into being the David Bowie everyone knows and loves. Here we go. Is from this 5 years box set. I've been collecting these box sets. They started in 2015. They've released one a year. They cover about 3 to 5 years of his discography per box. I just like it. I'm a sucker for box sets, and these are like 11 CDs, quite a bit smaller, save some shelf space. So what we have in here is his first album that most people would know, again, self-titled. They later changed it to Space Oddity when that song became big. So some people know it as Space Oddity. In America, it was released under some weird name, like A Man of Music, I can never remember the name of it. But of course it has Space Oddity on here, a huge song for him, obviously catapulted him to stardom because of, a big reason is because America went to the moon, quite honestly. But there's some other really good songs on here, Janine, Unwashed and Somewhat Slightly Dazed. So it's a pretty good song, a pretty good album to start with. Next album, The Man Who Sold the World. Black Country Rock is a great song. Not a bunch of singles on here anyone would really know, except for probably The Man Who Sold the World. I don't necessarily love this album. It's okay. It's really just all a preamble to get to this, Hunky Dory. One of my favorite albums of his. I mean, every song on here is just great. Changes, Life on Mars, another huge hit for him. So that's a great album. It's also over here in vinyl. This is a 2015 reprinting. So there you go. Next up is his biggest album, The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. Amazing album. Again, pretty much every song on here is a classic. I have a hard time choosing a favorite album, but this is probably it for me. So this box includes the original mix, and then it also includes a 2003 mix with a little bit different artwork and stuff, which is cool, from the same sessions. So that's fun to look at. And then, again, in vinyl. I actually bought this in college, and I just recently re-listened to it, and it's not in the best condition. I should probably buy a new one that sounds better. But great album. Next album, very much in the same vein as the one before it, Aladdin Sane. Some really good songs on here. I mean, you're going to hear that a lot. Good album, really good songs, so be ready for it. Watch That Man, Driving Saturday, Genie, all great. And here it is on vinyl. Again, this is a reprinting from 2013. What's great about this album is this inner sleeve I really like. I mean, come on, that's great. That's great. So, great album. In the box set, the next thing is this Live Santa Monica 72. Just like what it says. I think I get kind of confused, and I can never really remember. I think this is their last show as Spiders, which was his backing band. And I think this is the one where he says on stage, "This will be our last performance." And none of the band members knew that he was going to say that. So it kind of took them by surprise. Next is the motion picture soundtrack. Again, this is just another live album of that same tour. And then finally, well, from this box set, Pinups. This is an all covers album from artists he grew up in from the mid-'60s that influenced him. All English artists, I believe. There was talk that there would be a Pinups 2 and that those would include American artists, but that never materialized. This is an okay album. It's a fine placeholder. All of his albums previously had included, for the most part, one cover and all the rest originals. These were all covers, and again, there was one point where it was going to be all covers except for one original to kind of mirror his regular albums, but that didn't happen. These are all covers. The last thing in this box is Recall number 1. It's 2 CDs of singles, a lot of original mono single version, original UK mono single. It's like, fine. German single edit. Okay. Is it necessary? Not at all. So I'm glad I have it. Yes. So that takes care of that box set. I do have some doubles of these. For the most part, when I got these box sets, I got rid of the CDs that I was replacing, unless, for the most part, I had a Ryko edition. Because the Ryko editions, these were the first time that these albums were on CD. We'll get to that later. And they have some bonus tracks on them. So I kept them for that reason. Some of these bonus tracks still have only been reprinted on these CDs that are out of print, and some of them cost a lot of money nowadays. So, Man Who Sold the World, Ryko edition. We also have the Ziggy Stardust Ryko edition. This is cool because it's just got a really cool thing and a book, and again, bonus tracks. And a really cool booklet. And then finally is the 30th anniversary edition of Ziggy Stardust. This has a second disc of pretty much what was covered in that recall, I think is all covered on here, but I like this. It's just a really nice book. So I kept it. So that's his first kind of box set. From there, we go to Who Can I Be Now? This covers 74 to 76. So the first thing from here, Diamond Dogs. It's fine. Originally, it was going to be a theatrical like musical of 1984, but he couldn't get the rights from the estate of whoever wrote 1984. I don't know. But there's still some, they have a song, 1984, there's a song called Big Brother. So the idea of that made its way onto this album. It's fine. Rebel Rebel's probably the biggest song on here, but there's some good stuff on there. No, okay. So after that, we have David Live. And they redid it also, David Live, the 2005 mix. So a little bit different. I think there's some different, this one has a couple more additional tracks. Good album though, good live album, and also have it on vinyl. Yeah, looks good. After that, the big thing about this album is that it included a Killed album that never saw the light of day called The Gouster. Most of this stuff ended up on his next album, Young Americans. So this is the Philly soul sound that made it onto Young Americans. Again, most of what's on here made it onto Young Americans, but there are a couple of songs that were new. So it was kind of, and there are some different remixed versions. So it was cool to hear that for the first time. Then the next thing, Young Americans, again, the Philly sound, Luther Vandross, an unknown at the time, Luther Vandross, like backing vocalist on this album. John Lennon did some stuff on this album. Bruce Springsteen came down to see him while he was recording in Philadelphia. And Bowie had covered a couple of Springsteen songs. It's Hard to Be a Man in the City, I think, is kind of the best known one. So there's that. Next is, again, another one of my favorites. Again, it's always hard to pick one. Station to Station, a great album, 6 songs long, but when they're all winners, that's okay. They also included a 2010 mix on the album, so there it is again. This originally was going to be the soundtrack to the movie he was working on at the time, The Man Who Fell to Earth. The cover art is a still from that movie. But that did not come to be, so he just released this. This was recorded here in Los Angeles, where I live. And according to Bowie, he does not remember recording any of this because he was coked out of his mind the whole time. He hated living in LA, and after recording this album, he kind of decamped to somewhere else, which we'll get to, and kind of made probably some of the biggest artistic statements of his career. But before we get to there, we'll finish with this box. The next one is Live Nassau Coliseum 76. Great album. This originally surfaced on a Station to Station special edition box that came out 7 years ago or something like that. So this is all from the Station to Station tour. It's a great recording. Love that album. It's probably my favorite live recording of his. And then to finish the box is Recall number 2. Again, single edits. Nothing that anyone really needs, but it's nice to have nonetheless. So after he left Los Angeles, really quick, I have the Raikyo edition of Diamond Dogs. So there you go. So he left LA. Oh, god damn it. I keep forgetting his stuff. This was released a couple years ago. Cracked Actor, Live Los Angeles 74. It was released on vinyl for Record Store Day 2 years ago, I think. And then just got a CD release like 6 months later. So it's really good. It's fun to see like how theatrical his show was. I think this is the tour. At one point he got out like a skull and like sang to a skull. It's like, what's going on? So that would have been fun to see. Next up, this is the box set that was just released this past year, A New Career in a New Town. And that references a song, but then also the fact that he had moved to Berlin to record his next 3 albums with Brian Eno. They're known as the Berlin Trilogy now. That's Low, Heroes, and Lodger. Of these, Low is my favorite. Again, it's in the mix for favorite album. Station to Station, Low, and Ziggy Stardust are my favorite of his albums. Just a great album. None of these songs were hits. And basically, when he was in Berlin, all the side Bs of all these are pretty much just instrumentals, which is weird for such a well-known artist as him to do something like that. But so the first one is Low. I have it on vinyl. This is the inner sleeve. It's actually up on my wall, if you can see that. So that's why I don't have the artwork for it. Just the sleeve. So the next album, Heroes. This is actually my least favorite of his Berlin trilogy. It's still great. Obviously the song Heroes is great. Everyone knows it for a reason. I've been trying to find this on vinyl, and it's really expensive. They haven't repressed it yet. They've been slowly repressing his vinyl, and for some reason they haven't done Heroes yet. I don't know why. I'm sure they will. But right now, like, all people are trying to get like $60 for versions of like copies of Heroes. It's like, I'm not gonna pay $60 for this album. Also included in this box set is this single of Heroes in French and German, which is interesting. Why they decided to put this on a single CD, it's 4 songs. I don't know. I would have chosen something else from this box to put on its own CD, and we'll get to that. But it's kind of interesting to have it. I also have that single. Oh, I missed something too. On vinyl. The B-side is V.T. Schneider, and he was in Kraftwerk. Schneider was named after one of the members of Kraftwerk. It's kind of interesting. Something I missed. This is he's going through all of his singles and doing picture discs of his singles. This is the Be My Wife single, and the B-side is Art Decade. live version, which is cool. This single means a lot to me because my wife gave it to me as a wedding gift. And the song is Be My Wife. She's over there. I really should have given it to her because it's Be My Wife, not Be My Husband. But nonetheless, it holds a special place in my heart. And this is from the Low album, but I missed it earlier. Okay. Stage, another live album this is recorded off the Heroes tour. They did this really weird thing where when they originally released it, record 2, side 1 is all Low songs, and side 2 is all Heroes songs. But that's not the way they played it. So people were kind of mad that they didn't release the track listing in the order that he played the songs. And actually side 1 of disc 1 is all Ziggy songs. So it's all broken down kind of by album. So what they did is they re-released it some years later, a 2005 mix, I believe. And this is in the original order it was played in concert. So it has a couple of bonus songs that the original vinyl release, which is what this is based on, doesn't have. And then they did it again in the box set, and this again has even more songs than this version, so it's kind of ridiculous. But this is the most current version from a 2017 mix, and I like it. It's a good album. I think did I miss something down here? Yes. I have this in with Bowie. It's Philip Glass Symphony based on the his Low album. I've listened to it once. I don't get it. I'll probably give it another spin. Thought you guys would want to see it. Okay. Next is Lodger. I mentioned my favorite albums. This would be like my next tier. Great album. I don't think it gets enough love. And a really, really weird cover where they I'll show it to you in the vinyl. They put masking tape on his face to make his face look really weird. So in this box set, they also have a new 2017 mix of it. And actually in here, I don't know if you can see that, but it just looks really unsettling. He looks all broken. And again, in vinyl, even better. You can see how weird he looks. Great album. If you can find this, I suggest this over Heroes. Personally, I think it's a better album. From that album, the single Boys Keep Swinging and Fantastic Voyage. Good song. Almost done with this box set. Next thing is Scary Monsters. Some people call it Scary Monsters. The song is called Scary Monsters, parentheses, and Super Creeps. On the spine, it just says Scary Monsters, but on the album itself, it says Scary Monsters, and then onto the back, and Super Creeps after an ellipses. So I'm not really sure officially what the name of the album is. Most people just call it Scary Monsters. Really great album. This is probably considered his last great album. Some people might consider what he did right before his death also great. We'll get to that later. But this is probably the last of his amazing albums. I believe this was 80 or 81. But even though it's an 80s album, it more goes along with his Berlin trilogy, I'd say, because the first side is all just great songs. Second song is also great songs, but a little more atmospheric. like the Berlin trilogy. Here it is in vinyl, and you can see Scary Monsters and Super Creeps. So who knows what the name of this album is? And apparently 1980 is when it was released. Record Store Day release from a couple years ago. This is Kingdom Come, a song off of Scary Monsters. It's a cover of a song by Tom Verlaine. The original is on one side, the Bowie is on another. Tom Verlaine is the leader of a band called Television. If you don't know them, you should definitely check them out. They're amazing. Their self-titled debut just blows you away. It's really good. And then we have, again, Ryko edition with some bonus tracks. Okay, and then the end of this box, this, like I said, this one was released this past year, so this is the last box, but they're going to keep going. They release every August. They're only like $100. I think it's well worth the money. This is Recall version 3. Again, single edits and stuff like that. What it does have on here is Bertolt Brecht's Ball, which is what I would have, instead of doing this Heroes disc, I would have put that by itself on a disc and put these songs with this. That's just my preference. Also have the single of it. So Bertolt Brecht is like a playwright. He wrote this kind of like musical that Bowie starred in for the BBC, and then he also sang a couple songs from the musical, which that's what this is, and they're on here. So that's it for the boxes. Really quickly, all of the boxes also include these really nice hardbound books that talk about each album. So again, if you want to start collecting Bowie, I think the boxes are great. So now we get into his 80s stuff. Although the first thing up is a soundtrack to this German movie called Christian F. for Kinder von Bahnhof Zoo. This is just a compilation of earlier songs. Never seen the movie. I think in the movie he makes an appearance. The lead of the movie, this Christian F., goes to a Bowie concert where he sings on stage, I believe. I wouldn't mind checking it out, but I've never watched it. But it's good. Got a lot of good songs of his. It's lesser known stuff. No singles, I don't think, but really good. Then probably his biggest album sales-wise, Let's Dance. Really good album. Modern Love, China Girl, Let's Dance. Those are the first 3 songs on it. I mean, come on. He was kind of tired of, basically he just wanted to make something that was a hit. So he brought in Nile Rodgers from Chic, and he produced it. And those first 3 songs, Modern Love, China Girl, Let's Dance, that's nuts. So I mean, at the time, he was up there with Michael Jackson and Madonna and Prince as like the biggest stars in the world. Like before, with the Berlin trilogy, didn't really sell very well. Artistically, they were great and everyone appreciates them now, but no one was buying them really at the time. And he was like, I'm just going to make an album that makes me a star. And that's what he did. Here it is on vinyl. Right after that, he released the greatest. Sorry about that. Check. So right after that, he released the best Christmas song of all time, Peace on Earth, A Little Drummer Boy with Bing Crosby. Great song. This was from a Bing Crosby Christmas special in the 70s, and Bing Crosby actually died a couple of weeks later. And actually, the weirdest story, he did Mark Bolan's TV show a couple weeks before this, and Bolan also died a couple weeks after he filmed that. So all these people, all these musical greats that he was filming with were dying right after he filmed with them, which is incredible. The B-side of this is Fantastic Voyage, which is also the B-side to Boys Keep Swinging. Great song. Next. Tonight. He wanted to get right into the studio after he finished touring Let's Dance, and he really didn't have any songs. A lot of the songs on this album were actually taken from an Iggy Pop album that he helped co-write from the late 70s. I don't think he wrote single-handedly any of the songs on here. It's a lot of covers. It's okay. The second, I was just listening to it recently, the second side is actually great. Here it is on vinyl. Neighborhood Threat, Blue Jean, Tumble and Twirl, I keep forgetting, Dancing with the Big Boys are all really good songs. The other side, it's fine. But it's a great album cover. You don't really notice it. I mean, you kind of do in the CD, but that's why one of the reasons everyone loves vinyl so much. You can really, it's just a really beautiful cover. So, a couple of singles from that album tonight with Tumble and Twirl. And this is also like I think there's a poster in here, or this itself is a poster, which is kind of cool. And then Blue Jean, backed by Dancing with the Big Boys, and this is like a blue vinyl, which is cool. Always fun for that colored vinyl. Next, the Labyrinth soundtrack. Half of this is instrumentals done by Trevor Jones. The other half are Bowie originals, some of which are good, some of which are great. Underground, really good. Magic Dance is actually pretty fun. Chilly Down, not good. As the World Falls Down, really good. And it's a great movie if you haven't checked it out. So, David, Labyrinth soundtrack. Next is Never Let Me Down. Not a lot to say about this. This is not good for the most part. There's a song on here, I can never remember which one it is. I think it's Too Dizzy. He's basically disowned, says it's awful, and on subsequent releases of this album, it was stricken from the record. But it's on this version. Yeah. Probably his worst album. So up until that point, his back catalog, this is in 89 or 90, his back catalog was unavailable on CD. And he made a deal with Ryko to release it, and kind of as a primer, they released this Sound and Vision box set. It's 3 discs. It's a weird combination of greatest hits and rarities and live. It's just like a really weird thing, but it's good because it's all really good stuff. Like on here is London by Tata, which is on his first self-titled album, but they didn't have the rights. Well, okay, this is a re-recording in 1970. This is just weird. It's just a weird little box. That same year, they released Changes. Bowie's first vinyl greatest hits was called Changes 1. He also released the Changes 2. Those were in the 70s. This was his first of many, as you will soon see, Bowie CD compilations. There's so many of them, and I have most of them. Get excited. But this is a great album. I mean, Space Oddity, John I'm Only Dancing, Changes, Ziggy Stardust, Suffragette City, Gene Genie, Diamond Dogs, and that's only half the album. It's great. So after the failure of Never Let Me Down, Bowie decided that he was tired of kind of chasing the pop stardom, and so he wanted to be in a band, which he had never really done since his really early days, even before that very first London '66 album. He was in a band. They didn't really go anywhere. So he created Tin Machine. There's some good stuff on here. It's not great, but some good stuff. So they released two albums. Here's Tin Machine 2. You can tell it's the American version because the statues don't have their genitalia on there. And then finally they released a live album. I think it's worth checking out if you're a Bowie fan. Again, it's not great, but there's some good stuff on here. So he goes back to being a solo artist. He releases Real Cool World, a song from the soundtrack Cool World. I don't know if anyone remembers this movie. It was a mixture of cartoon and live action, kind of like Roger Rabbit, if I remember correctly. I don't even remember this song, quite honestly. It's been a while since I've listened to this. So, another compilation. Again, put out by Ryko. Singles 69 to 93. This is really good. It's pretty much all his singles. And I just got this version because it has a third bonus disc, and this is, again, the single of him and Bing Crosby singing Peace on Earth, Little Drummer Boy. And that was I believe that was the first time it had ever been released on CD. It's subsequently been on a couple compilations. So pick that up. This is his Buddha of Suburbia album. This was for a BBC production called Buddha of Suburbia. Most of this stuff on here is instrumentals, some really good instrumentals. What is that? The Mysteries, I think, is a really good song. Strangers When We Meet was kind of a big hit for him, big-ish. For the longest time, this wasn't really part of his discography, and it wasn't even released in America until like 2 years after the fact. In the UK, I think it was 93, and in America it was 95. And it was just kind of like a random throwaway album too, at least in the States, because it was released right before his next album, which is Black Tie, White Noise. There's some good songs on here. This is bookended by a song called The Wedding, and the last song is the wedding song. He had just married Iman right before he recorded this. He's starting to get into more adult contemporary, I would say, but it's good. Jump, They Say, is really good. Night Flights I like a lot. And this version has a second CD of singles and remixes. I mean, who doesn't need Black Tie, White Noise, Here Come Da Jazz remix? I mean, everyone needs that. And there's also a DVD as well, talking about the making of the movie, or excuse me, the CD, which I haven't watched, but it looks really good. There's one track on the DVD on marriage. I'm excited to hear what he says about marriage. So yeah, pretty good album. Pretty good album. Next up, we have, again, kind of like with Scary Monsters, titling-wise, some people refer to it as One Outside, and some people just refer to it as Outside. I don't know which one's correct, because on the cover, obviously, One Outside, and on the spine it just says Outside. Really, it's called Outside, the Nathan Adler Diaries, a Hypercycle. That's really pretentious. This was kind of a foray into science fiction-y internet. He was really a vanguard, actually, on the internet. He had this thing called Bowie Net, and I think he was like one of the first artists to have a website. So this is, it's supposed to be like about a murder, and it's all very convoluted, but there are a couple of good songs on there. This, again, same album, but in this cool book, which is really cool. And all of the songs, they are like, there's like all this prose. It's really, you could really dive deeply into it and probably get a lot out of it, but I have not done that. But a pretty good album. A single off that album, The Heart's Filthy Lesson. It's fine. Another compilation, All Saints, Collected Instrumentals, 1977 to 1999. So basically this is just instrumentals from Low, and then up till even including some from this album. It's good. Yeah, all of his instrumentals are really good. So it's kind of cool to have all in one place. I'd probably rather put on Low if I want to hear, because most of the songs from the instrumentals from Low, I believe, are on here. I'd rather just put on Low, but still kind of cool to have it all in one place. Hours was his next album. Again, very adult contemporary, a little slow, but some good songs on here. It's fine. Here's another version of it with a second disc of remixes. One by Beck, apparently, so I haven't actually checked that out, but I have to. And a cool little book. I'm a sucker for special packaging, so it's cool to have a book. Next in the list is a couple of singles from that album. Both of these are Survive. This one, unfortunately, doesn't have the artwork with it, but slightly different B-sides. But singles. VH1 Storytellers from right after the Heroes album. This is a CD and a DVD. It's good because he gets into, obviously, Storytellers. He gets into some of the songs, where they came from. He talks about Mark Bolan a couple times, who he had a good friendship with kind of before either one of them were big. And there's a song on here, Can't Help Thinking About Me, which predates that first album we looked at, which is on here, which is cool. One of the things I dislike about this is that the DVD has 12 tracks, but the CD only has 8. It's like, just give me the audio for those other 4 tracks. Why not? Why not? But it's good. Next up, we have Earthling, his drum and bass album. This is the first time, well, this is one of the times. Obviously, one thing about David Bowie is he's considered a chameleon, and he always sees what's over the horizon. This is one time where he was definitely chasing the fad. There are a couple of good songs on here, though. Little Wonder, I'm Afraid of Americans, being 2 of them. There we go. So yeah, it's an interesting time capsule of what, it's not like drum and bass was ever really big. but people thought it would be big, and obviously it wasn't. But some good songs on here. Also, this single, actually just got it from a friend. I'm Afraid of American single, so I'm excited to check that out. V1 edit, original edit, clean edit, and then a song called V3. So interested. Ooh, special guest on V3, Ice Cube. Wow, gonna have to check that out. Lastly, from this album is Earthling in the City. This is actually the first Bowie album it's not even an album, the first Bowie CD I ever got. This was included when you bought GQ magazine. I'm a sucker for free things, so I saw, this was in 1997, I saw a GQ magazine and this was like glued to the cover. And obviously I knew David Bowie from his hits. I was like, well, if it's free, I'll buy this magazine. So this is actually the first Bowie CD I ever got. It's mostly just songs from wherever it went from this. So, yeah. Next up is another compilation, Essential David Bowie, best of 69 to 74. This is really weird because it says it's a best of, but then it has stuff like essential best of, but then it has All the Young Dudes, which was a great song that he wrote, but he never really released it. So it's on here. It's like, that's Velvet Goldmine, a B-side. It's like, it's kind of hard to call something a best of when it's, I don't know. It's a weird collection, but it's good. I didn't realize that this is the same. I already had this CD in a 3 CD set. I didn't realize it when I bought it, but it's still, I still would have bought it because of the packaging. Again, it's just got a cool book and stuff. So next, Bowie at the Beeb. This collects some of his 60s into 70s recordings at the BBC. There's 2 discs of 60s and 70s stuff, and then there's a 3rd disc of a BBC Radio Theatre London June 27-2000 recording, which is, I think, the tour for Earthling. So yeah, this is really great. Some really good early stuff. Again, In the Heat of the Morning and London by Tata, Silly Boy Blue, which is all on his first self-titled album. But then it goes all the way up until Rock and Roll Suicide, Lady Stardust. So basically from his first solo album up until Ziggy Stardust has stuff on here. This is a really great album. Next, Heathen. I think most people thought this was kind of like a return to form for him after Earthling and the other album before that. It's pretty good. There's some really good songs on here. And this has a bonus disc with some remixes on it, which are fine. Touring that album, he did, in America at least, he was on this Area 2 tour, which Moby was also on that tour, and Moby kind of put it together. He was the curator kind of for this touring one-day festival. It was a really eclectic lineup, but Bowie was on it. It's the only time I saw him live, and I burned this off the internet. This is his Denver, Colorado stop, August 10th, 2002. So yeah, unfortunately, I was only able to see him live once, but it was really good. And I'm tall, so I see over most people, and we definitely made eye contact. And he was definitely loving my vibe. So here's a Best of Bowie CD, another Best of Bowie CD. What's interesting about this is that there were different track listings for like 40 different nations. So this is the American track listing. You can see there in the corner, there's a little American flag, but there's a UK one, and they're small little changes. Nothing that I've heard is worth, trying to find one over another. But another compilation, the Platinum Collection. This is actually, the first disc of this is this same disc. But this is 3 discs, and they're all good because it's, his best of stuff. So basically it's 69 to 74, then 74 to 79, and 80 to 87. So some good stuff in all of that. With that release also came The Collection. And this is an interesting release because it's, again, a compilation, but it's a compilation of non-singles. It's all album cuts. From Space Oddity to Scary Monsters. I don't know why there's only 12 songs. I don't know why they didn't go deeper and include less dance and other stuff, and Pinups is also not included. But it's an interesting look at his lesser-known songs. It's kind of cool. Reality was his next album. Some good songs on here. And this is a special edition double disc, which, again, I'm a sucker for. It's good. Not great. I haven't listened to it in a while, quite honestly. But there's some good stuff on here. Next is a reality tour, basically touring the previous album. 2 discs, good stuff. Record in Dublin. Yeah, he's always puts out good live albums. I always like hearing them. And it's always interesting what he pulls out of his discography and what he'll play on certain tours. So next is another version of Sound and Vision, which was this this was re-released. This is now 4 discs, and it goes up to include Black Tie, White Noise. Pretty much the same track listing. Everything that's on these 3 CDs are on here as well, and then additional things. It's good. And then he took his 10-year hiatus, and surprised everyone by coming out with The Next Day. This is a extended version. It's got a second disc of rarities and remixes and stuff, and then it also includes a DVD of the videos, all of which are just really interesting and really cool. So this is a good album. Nothing has changed. Everyone found this really interesting because this 3-disc version of this is another Greatest Hits album, but it was done chronologically backwards. So it starts with a new song, Sue, or In a Season of Crime, which he would actually release on his last album. But from there it goes backwards all the way back into the last couple songs on here are Space Oddity, and then in the Heat of the Morning, Silly Boy Blue, Can't Help Thinking About Me, and even Liza Jane, which is credited to Davy Jones. He hadn't even changed his name yet, and the King Bees. It's actually a really good song. So in the late 90s, he was going to do this album called Toy, and it was kind of recreating and re-recording songs from his early career, such as Liza Jane and Can't Help Thinking About Me. but he gave it to the label, and they're like, yeah, we'll release it, and then they kind of pushed it, and he was having some friction with his label, and it never really made the light of day. It has since been put on the internet, although nothing official. So we don't really know what the track listings were, and we don't know which edits they would have had on the album had it been released. But just a little side note there. This is a good mix though. After that are 2 CDs my friend gave me from Station to Station, Volume 1 and 2. These are all audio recordings of TV appearances, where he would do live TV appearances. Like there's stuff with Mark Bolan. You can see their picture, possibly Bowie and Bolan here. And I actually haven't listened to these, but when I look through these, like the track listings, I'm excited to put them on. Like the last track listing on Volume 2 is The Man Who Sold the World, MTV Music Awards Paris, 1995. It's like, okay, that's cool. So I'll need to check those out at some point. Finally, well, not finally, but his last album, Black Star, very highly regarded, obviously. Of course, it's funny because he released this. I didn't pick it up for a couple of days. I don't know why. I guess I was just too busy or anything. I actually bought this on the day he died, I bought it at maybe like 7 o'clock on my way home from work or wherever I was, and then he died. I had learned he died like 2 or 3 hours later, so that was very sad. But there's some really good songs on here. It can be a hard listen just because it's very weird, very jazzy, but obviously it's very good. So at the time he was recording this, he also had this Lazarus Broadway musical. And this is the music as sung by the cast, which included Michael C. Hall, and there was one person that most people would know, but I can't find it. Oh, Christine Milioti. So those are kind of stars that people might know. But it's all his music throughout his life. I don't know what the exact story is of the musical. But the reason I got it is because CD2 is basically the last recordings, the last songs that he recorded. Lazarus, No Plan, Killing a Little Time, and When I Meet You. They were later released on CD by themselves, but at the time, this was the only way to get it, was to buy this. I haven't listened, like I said, to the cast recordings, but someday when I got nothing else to do, I'll put it on and check it out. The last thing we have, of course, another compilation, David Bowie Legacy. I'm sure there'll be many more, but as of right now, this was the last one. It was released in 2016 and includes Lazarus and other stuff from Black Star. So there it is. That's him, young Bowie, old Bowie. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. I by no means am a scholar of David Bowie, so if I got something wrong, well, too bad. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed yourself.